Hi, everyone, and welcome to Story Night's 10th anniversary flagship season, The Decades, and the launch of our adapted format, Story WEBi-NiGHT. Hopefully everyone's all right after that little shake-up just a minute ago. My name is Madeline Beck. I'm a regional public radio reporter with the Mountain West News Bureau and Boise State Public Radio, so all my colleagues are pretty busy at the moment. But Boise State Public Radio is a proud sponsor of Story Night, and it's my pleasure to introduce the artistic director and host of tonight's show, Jody Eichelberger.
Hello! Where am I? Am I here? No. I am here. Yes, I'm here. Hello! I had said how I was nervous about pushing all the buttons tonight, and when we had that earthquake a moment ago, I was like, oh my God, did I do that? Did I push the wrong button? It's happened already. Oh, geez. I'm so happy to have all you here tonight. Thank you, Madeline Beck, for that introduction and for all the work that you are doing at Boise State Public Radio and all of your compatriots there. And I also need to thank our special guest musician for tonight, Dr. Chad Spears. Here he is. We're calling him 10 Fingers Spears tonight. When we moved to this format, we asked ourselves, what can we do? What instrument can we have here that we couldn't have at Jump? And of course, what came to us was the organ, because it would be quite difficult for us to transplant this instrument onto our stage at Jump. And also, he's going to be playing and has been playing, people who came on a little early tonight, featured songs, pop songs from the 2010s, excuse me. My bow tie is a little tight. Wanted to dress up for you all tonight. I suppose I should start by acknowledging the obvious, which is that my microphone is enormous. It's very big, but hopefully that is giving you some very big sound to each of you in your home. You know, sometimes size does matter. I don't know what else to say. Fortunately, the size of the earthquake was not big enough to knock my Story Night sign down off from behind me there. Also, oh, speaking of my Story Night sign, I need to make an adjustment to it tonight, because tonight we are Story WEBi-NiGHT. So excuse me for just one moment while I alter the sign slightly. There we go. All right, all set. Story WEBi-NiGHT. And what I really want to do too is thank our season sponsor, which even though we've transferred over to this totally different format for the show tonight, our season sponsor has stayed with us, the Pettit Group Real Estate, through this big change. And so we're super happy that they've continued to support us, along with all of you who have made the leap to, some of you figure out a new technology and a new way to participate in Story Night. And I'm super excited that you are here tonight. The structure of the evening is the same. We're going to have 3 featured storytellers intermixed with a community story slam, but obviously our room is a little different. So let's take just a moment for you all to get a chance to explore your room as well. I'm gonna spotlight Carolyn Valaquette here real quick, our board president. She's monitoring the chats tonight. So if you have found that little chat screen on the bottom, if you type something in there, she'll watch that and she might be able to help you with any question that you have if it's like a tech thing during the show. So yeah, you may have to hover your cursor over the video image and then you might see some controls down toward the bottom there. And one of the other controls that you should be able to find is a little button that says raise hand. I think it's down there somewhere along the right. So let's just test that out. Let's see how you all do. Oh, I see people raising their hands. There we go. Some of you were very quick. All right, we have about 150 people here, and so far 34 of you have found your hand. And the number is rising quickly. Very good. It's too bad this isn't an auction. I would have so many bids right now. All right, good work, everyone. We're up to 70 or so of you that have raised your hand. So we're going to use that in a couple of places in the show. And one of the things we'll be doing with that is that if you would like to be a story slammer during the show, at the points in the show where we invite that to happen, I'll ask you to raise your hand. And that way your name will float up to the top of my screen. And supposedly I am then able to click on you and promote you to a panelist and share your video and your audio. So you will need to have your video and audio enabled. Once I do click you and you come into a come in as a slammer, you will leave our session briefly. That might be a little scary for you because you won't hear us talking for a moment. You won't maybe see us for a moment. There'll be a little spoolie thing there for you. And then you will appear and you'll be able to share your story. Same as we do on the stage. It's a 5-minute limit. We like to have you on topic. And tonight our theme is the 2010s. This season marks our 10th anniversary at Story Night. And so all season we've been celebrating a different decade. We started with the 70s. Now we've made our way all the way up to the 2010s. And we have kept our show as it was going to be. Same featured storytellers that we had scheduled before. Each of them has selected a story. That hasn't changed either. Hi, Lita. I actually see that you're asking if you should lower your hands now, and I'm going to do it all for you. There you go. Your hands have all been lowered. So those have been reset for later in the show. And but before we get to our featured storytellers and any possible slammers, I actually thought it would be helpful to have a special guest, somebody who is somewhat of an expert on 10. And that is because our guest's name is Devin, and she just celebrated her 10th birthday just a couple of weeks ago. So if I'm doing everything right, we're going to see her right about now. Hi, Devin.
Hi. Sorry, clearing my throat. Hi, I'm Devin Mitika, and I recently turned 10, and this is the story of my birthday. So I woke up, and then, I felt really happy because I was, super excited. And then I went downstairs, ate my breakfast, went to school, and, when I went to school, I felt really, really happy because I was really excited for my school birthday because I've had multiple school birthdays, but I was littler, so I didn't particularly remember them as well. But I was really excited, and so I went to my classroom and I had a couple of classes, and then I went to lunch, and I really I talked to my friends, and it was really it was so fun, and my teachers were super nice. And at lunch my whole class sang happy birthday to me, so that was really, really sweet. Then went to recess, which that was fun. My friends really like making skits with me, so we made a whole bunch of funny skits. One was about Frozen, which that was fun. And then it was a PE day, so we did this game. We made our own games, and it was just so fun. We made kind of a birthday game for me, which that was really sweet. We split up into teams, and my teams were really nice to me, and they made a birthday game up, and it was actually really fun. And then we went back inside, and I was really, I wanted to be the end of the day because I wanted to go home and open all my presents up and see my family. So I went home. Actually, I did hand out some treats because my school does something where I give if it's your birthday, you have the choice to give out treats to your class. So I gave Baby Yoda cookies out, and since there are people with nut allergies in my class, I did give, since the cookies were in a factory that contained nuts, they couldn't have it, so I gave Guru donuts to them. So yeah, I went home, and then it was like that where I really wanted, like, I was just so happy when I was at home. And then we went to Ruth's Chris, which I was so happy about. I like walked in and I just smelled like delicious smells. I was like, yummy. It was just so fun. And then I had a filet, mashed potatoes, and um, asparagus. That was really delicious, and it was just so good. I can like remember the taste. And then uh, the waitress gave us dessert menus, and I really love. I have a sweet tooth. It, so I couldn't decide on the dessert, but I did have two of my favorite. There was the creme brulee and the cheesecake. So I said, surprise me to the waitress. So when they brought the desserts in, she came out with a cheesecake that said happy birthday on it and a creme brulee on the side. And she said it was a free creme brulee. So I got one dessert, like a dessert for free. So that was like amazing. That was like, I was like, whoa, thank you. Then we sang happy birthday, and then it was time for presents because my mom said that we should wait until after dessert. So first I opened up my card. I had gotten one thing from my parents. I opened up my card and I was so happy because my mom was going to take me to San Francisco to go see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, but that was canceled. But I do have they gave us other tickets so we can go back and see another showing. That's when the coronavirus isn't happening. Yeah, and then I opened my break present. This is like a huge moment. I opened it up and I saw a box that was an iPhone box, and I was like, what? I just got a phone? That was like so amazing. I was like, whoa, I really love that moment. And then I was like so happy, and like I got it set up a lot, and then we went to the mall later, and we got like a phone protector and stuff so my phone won't break when I drop it. It actually took them a while to put it on, but that's still okay. And then like when I got home that night, I really felt 10, like just a moment that I just felt 10. So yeah, that was my birthday. Yeah. So bye.
Thank you so much. And here's a little gift for you. Chad's going to play a song for you on the organ. I forgot to have him play earlier. Thank you, Chad. Devin, did you recognize that song?
Yes, I did.
Oh, what was it?
Bad Romance by Lady Gaga.
Very good, which I believe was from 2010. Gosh, you were just like, you were barely born, if you were born at all. But you still know Bad Romance by Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thanks so much for sharing with us tonight about what it means to be 10.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right. Well, we are off to a great start. If this goes anything like rehearsal, we'll continue like this and everything will be good. And then eventually it will all devolve into us sharing each other's pets on screen. So far, I haven't my cat hasn't visited me yet, but that could happen at some point during the show. I'm going to introduce you to our featured storytellers. We will move them, or I will go to their camera so you can at least see their faces briefly. And we're going to go in reverse order. So the last one we are going to hear from is, well, it's Kate Brusse. And there she is. Here she is. There she is. Hello, Kate.
Good evening.
We're looking forward to hearing your story. And then we also have tonight Issac Prado. Hello, Issac. Oh, I didn't unmute you yet. You can say hi now.
Hi.
There we go. But first up is a storyteller that we've marketed her in a couple of different ways, and one of them actually turned kind of dark. We said a disappointment by the age of 10. And it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of sad. But so our alternate version is 10 traveling across America 10 miles at a time. But before we get to her, though, we have a little introduction by by Dr. Chad Spears. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to our screen, Sharli Turner.
So when I was about 10, my dad brought home a horse, and he built this makeshift corral to keep it in, but it kept getting out, and my dad would go find it and bring it back, and he taught me how you break a horse. He said, if they don't do what you want, you kick them in the belly and you show them who's the boss. So I was born into a family of boys, and out of 6 kids, I was the only girl. So it was really important to be tough in my family, at least for the boys. For me, it was more important to be sweet, to keep my knees together when I was sitting and act like a lady. And I was a daddy's girl. When my dad would come home from work, I'd pull his boots off, and at night he would carry me out under the stars and sing to me in his gravelly voice old cowboy songs. Thank you, Chad. That was one of them. And but by the age of 10, I was no longer my daddy's little princess. I always had my nose in a book. I fought with my brothers. My room was always a mess. I was a stubborn little kid, and when I talked back, my dad would show me who was the boss. So he would say, let's go for a walk. And he would lecture me on how a woman should be, compassionate and kind and loving and gentle and selfless. And the places we walked were beautiful. Northern Nevada is full of mountains and aspens and sagebrush and blue skies, but my dad's words were a kick in the belly. And I came away from those walks feeling like and believing that I was lazy and selfish and a failure. But my dad was a lawyer. He had grown up working ranches, so in his bones he was a cowboy. And even though his hands were soft, he always wore his boots and his Stetson with his suit and tie to the office. But he didn't make a lot of money practicing law because he spent most of his time on his favorite political cause, which was defending the land users of the West against the federal government and the environmentalists. So he advocated for ranchers, miners, loggers, anyone who used the land. He considered himself a freedom fighter, and he loved his country. He'd always say, God gave us this country. It's the greatest country on earth and the only place where a person can really be free. And when I was little, I absolutely adored my dad, and I wanted to grow up and change the world just like him. I remember once he he had me, I think he was giving me a project. I was at his office after school and gave me something to fill my time. So he said, go make a list of all the things you want to do. So I made this long list. I wanted to travel. I wanted to get a PhD. I wanted to write books. I wanted to study psychology and history and philosophy. And I wanted to dance. And I wanted to end poverty and war. And I showed my list to my dad, and all he said was, aren't you going to get married and have kids? So I tacked to get married and have children onto the end of my list, and we never spoke of it again. But as I got older, it was turning out that I was a pretty good writer. And so my dad started taking me on speaking tours with him, and he'd talk to me about his ideas while I drove, because he knew the power of the pen, and he wanted me to write for his cause. But I just couldn't get behind his ideas, because everything he said about freedom and independence didn't seem to apply to me. And I was starting to realize that I didn't always agree with everything that my dad said or that he believed. And my favorite English teacher in high school was very active in the Sierra Club. I had a few friends who were big fans of the environmentalist writer Edward Abbey. In fact, one night I ended up out in knee-deep in snow with a gas can and a couple of my friends. We were trying to burn down this dilapidated old wooden billboard on the edge of town, just like Edward Abbey's Monkey Wrench gang. But I didn't have the courage or the confidence to really speak out or do anything meaningful. I was afraid to have my own thoughts, let alone speak them or act on them in any meaningful way. So instead, I got depressed. And when I was 20, I got married, and I had my first baby the next year. And it was the first time my dad ever told me he was proud of me. I wasn't proud of me, though. I hadn't done any of the things on that list that I'd made so long ago, and I wasn't happy. I had grown up with a depressed mother, and I really didn't want my kids to have the same experience. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't seem to change myself or my life. And I figured that my dad had been right. I was and always would be a selfish, lazy failure. And then in the 10th month of 2009, right on the eve of the 2010s, I made a radical decision. I stopped going to church. And that decision shaped the next decade. A lot of people talk about being born again when they come to religion, but for me, leaving was a rebirth. I could read without censoring every sentence. I could write in my journals without editing every word. And I sometimes even started to speak my thoughts and ideas out loud. And things started to change. I went back to school. I got a graduate degree in literature, and I started writing every day. And my husband of 20 years moved out. A year later, we were divorced. It was an exhilarating time of change and discovery, but it was also a time of grief and loss, and it was more challenging than anything I'd ever experienced. I had been a stay-at-home mom my whole adult life. I had never supported myself. I had 2 children under the age of 4, a preteen and 2 teens, who were all very high needs kids, and I had walked away from the only community I'd ever known, and I hadn't yet built a new one. And though my family didn't disown me by any means, but there was definitely a split. We couldn't relate to each other anymore, and we just never talked. And then in the fall of 2013, it was another October, my grandmother died. So I drove in the middle of the night down to New Mexico, where she had lived. And I met my family in this Walmart parking lot in Gallup, New Mexico. It was Dia de los Muertos. And it was the first time I'd seen my father since I had left the church and divorced my husband. And the first thing he said to me was, "Let's go for a walk." There were more ravens in that parking lot than I've ever seen anywhere. And they were everywhere. They were in like around puddles when we walked. They'd fly up. There were on light poles and on tops of cars and in the eaves of the building. And my dad said, "There's too many ravens because the bureaucrats and the environmentalists won't let us control predators." He called them welfare birds. And then he motioned to the packed parking lot and he said, "It looks like it's welfare day on the reservation." Then he talked about the welfare system and how Roosevelt had sent our country off in the direction of socialism. And but my dad was an optimist, so he brought it back around to how this is still the greatest country on earth and it's still the land of opportunity. And I kind of quietly, kind of tentatively said, "Well, it is for some." And my dad stopped walking and asked me to explain what I meant. So you have to understand, my dad was a Green Beret. He was an intelligence officer in Vietnam. He'd spent his whole adult life as an attorney. He could intimidate and interrogate, and I had always been terrified of my dad. But I had well over a year of graduate school under my belt. If any of you guys know graduate students, we think we know everything. And I was learning to speak my mind with confidence, and I knew I could back up my assertions. So I took a deep breath and I explained to my dad exactly what I meant. The next time I saw my dad, it was early summer. I was visiting home and I was wearing a skirt. It was a hot summer day, so I was wearing a skirt that was a little bit above my knees. I had on a blouse that showed my shoulders. This was something I never would have worn when I was still in the church. And the first thing my dad said when he saw me was, "Let's go for a walk." I was sure that he was going to tell me to go change and then burn my clothes on the barbecue like he used to do when I was a teen. But instead, he wanted my thoughts on his latest political project. So in the spring of 2014, there had been a standoff between the BLM. It was an armed standoff between the BLM and the Bundys in Clark County, Nevada, over grazing rights. And prior to that, the dad, Cliven Bundy, had asked my father to represent him, but my dad refused. He knew that Bundy hadn't paid his grazing fees. He knew there was no case and he didn't want to touch it. But he had clients who had paid all of their grazing fees and they were still being impacted by what they felt were unfair changes to grazing laws. And so my dad was a big fan of Gandhi, and he had already organized 2 peaceful protests. There was the Jarbidge Shovel Brigade in 2000 and the Klamath Falls Bucket Brigade in 2001. So this time he wanted to organize, and he was in the process of organizing when we talked, a cross-country ride. He was organizing horses and riders to carry a satchel of petitions, Pony Express style, all the way across the country to deliver to Washington, D.C. And so by September of 2014, he had made his Grass Ride Cowboy Express a reality. And the first rider took off out of the surf, heading east from Bodega Bay, California. So the riders would ride 10-mile stretches and then pass off the satchel to the next person. But when my dad was riding a 10-mile stretch in Kansas, he was thrown from his horse and he suffered a concussion, but my dad was tough and he kept riding, and they made it all the way to Washington, D.C., where they made national television briefly for slowing down traffic, and then they rode on to the Atlantic. My dad called me when it was all over. He was still on the East Coast, and I could tell he was having the time of his life. But what I remember most from that conversation is him laughing at himself and saying, "You know, I've taken everything too seriously." So they headed back west, and when my dad got as far as Salt Lake City, he checked himself into the hospital there. They did a routine surgery to relieve pressure from the concussion. But my dad never woke up. My whole family was able to be there. We gathered around his bed with his cowboy boots, and we sang old Marty Robbins songs and waited for him to take his last breath. My dad's funeral was really hard for me. It was all about his politics, and I just wanted to be able to grieve the daddy who used to sing to me under the stars. The day before his funeral, which was Dia de los Muertos, is also Nevada Day, and his supporters were hailing him as a martyr for his cause, and some of them even wanted to carry his body in the parade, and thank God the funeral director didn't let that happen. But his face was plastered on almost every car and float. There was a helicopter flyover. On the day of his funeral, there was a 3-volley salute. And we all filled in his grave ourselves with the shovels from his shovel brigade. With every shovel full of dirt, I was thinking of another day. That Dia de los Muertos, a year before his funeral, when we had walked around that raven-infested Walmart parking lot. And I think it was the first real conversation I'd ever had with my dad. It wasn't an interrogation. He listened to me. He listened to what I said, and we had a dialogue. And we talked about war, we talked about politics, we talked about human rights, we talked about the environment. And I knew I pushed him a little too far when I challenged him on his denial of climate change, but he just looked at me and he said, I may not agree with you, but I sure do like you. And this time, it was so different than the times that he told me he was proud of me for being a good woman, because I could see in his eyes that he didn't just like me, he respected me. And I was finally learning to respect myself.
Thank you for that, both Sharli and Chad. And one of the interesting things about this format, Sharli, is that we're already seeing little chat comments coming in that say, that was absolutely beautiful, that was lovely. Usually that's in replace of me clapping all by myself for your story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And now it's a very exciting portion of our show where we don't know what's going to happen. If you are interested in being a story slammer from your home, go ahead and hit that raise hand button, and we will look and see who floats to the top of the list here. I suppose we even have some people that are from out of town, and it's possible we'll get a slammer who isn't even in the Treasure Valley. We don't really know. So there are a few hands being raised here. I'm gonna let there be a couple more. Here's a comment from Seattle, Washington, Sharli, that says, wonderful story, thank you. So that's a bonus of this platform. All right, here comes our next story. This will be our first story slammer. They may not, let's see, how do I do this? Okay, I'm clicking some buttons here, folks. Here it comes. And that person has now got a spinny wheel, and they should appear in my screen here in a second. I need to invite them to share their video. And ladies and gentlemen, our first story slammer ever in Story WEBi-NiGHT is Bonnie V. Say hi, Bonnie.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. All right, well, so far so good. I'm going to turn it over to you to share your story. It's the same rules as you know from our regular show. 5 minutes on the theme, somehow inspired by the tens. We are a family show, so we're going to try to keep it PG-13, which I'm sure you won't have a problem with. And the way that you'll know that you're out of time is either you'll receive a chat that says 1 minute left if we're that fancy. Look, you've already got love in the comments here coming in already, so that's nice. The other way you'll know is that I'll turn off your camera and mute you, and so no one will see or hear you anymore. And then Chad will also play some lovely music. And hey, just a heads up, actually, we're going to have that music come in now, Bonnie, and then when the organ finishes, you're clear to share your story. Sound good?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, here comes Chad.
So in 2010, I turned 65 and the usual milestones happened. I signed up for Medicare. I realized that it was retirement time and I thought about senior discounts. But I'll tell you something, I've gotten senior discounts since my early 40s. One look at this white hair and they just bring me up at the discount price. I try to explain, and I've even offered to pay the difference, but I can see that whatever look in their eyes while they're going, it's okay, just go on in. So I had no idea how to be old, and at that point I felt no pressure to figure it out. Turning 70 pushed me a bit though, because I had wonderful people in my counseling practice who were actively engaged in the process of dying, and they were my age. So they became my teachers, and I became more responsible. I met with a young, bright lawyer, and I updated my will, and I designated a durable power of attorney for healthcare and for finance. And I knew it was time for me to give up the office and close my practice. So on the first day, on that day I received my first Social Security check, I packed up my office, loaded up my car, and headed home. I'd only gotten about halfway when the phone rang. And when I saw my doctor's name on the phone screen, I pulled over. It's malignant, she said. That biopsy from 2 weeks earlier that I had completely forgotten about was rewriting the script for the next month of my life. Well, perfect timing, I thought. I have nothing on the calendar. And in about a month, with a lot of help, I was back on my feet. And then my appendix ruptured. And I can tell you that a 7-year-old will skate right through that and bounce right back. But a 70-year-old, not so much bounce. Everything I'd put off and still wanted to do came up to the top of the list. Long road trips through Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, bike rides, trail walks, movies, writing classes, and best of all, close one-on-one time with my family and dear friends. And now it's 2020. My health is good and I love my life. Sometimes I wonder about my mind, but so far I get by. And I'm still working on learning how to act my age. In January, I asked our daughter if she would please be a co-signer on my check account. Not because I needed it, because it's better to do it before you need it, you know? And then she asked if I had plans for my birthday, and I told her how grateful I was to just let this one slide. Oh, let's go out to dinner, she said. Just the two of us, the Brickyard. Well, I was delighted. She picked me up early and parking downtown was easy. And as we were walking across the street, she got a text. She has 1 million friends and 2 of them were right upstairs at the Reef. So she says, let's run up there and say hi. We have plenty of time before our reservation. Well, lighting was dim in the bar and there was a tall figure blocking the doorway to the dining area. And as we got closer, that silhouette was unmistakable. It was my ex-husband. Now he and his wife get around and maybe they had tickets somewhere else and they stopped here on their way. But then he stepped aside and a room full of dear friends from every corner of my life yelled, "Surprise, happy birthday!" Within 48 hours, group gatherings were limited to 10. And 10 days later, it was stay at home and keep 6 feet away from everybody else. And then all non-essential services were closed. And now numbers fill the news. So many cases, too few tests. So many need ventilators, not enough masks, and no TP. Scarcity, lack, need, uncertainty, and now an earthquake leave us all on edge. But my heart's full, and I have enough of everything that I need. They're saying we have no maps for times like this. Well, once there were no maps for the whole western half of this country. And Lewis and Clark set out to change that, trusting a native guide, a woman, to scout the way forward. Well, that's my kind of woman. I love exploring new territory. So if or when I get this virus, I'll be the one out front looking for whatever comes next, because I think I finally understand what it means to act my age. Thank you.
Yay, thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Chad. I was just trying to launch a poll, and I didn't realize the polls have to be done in order, so I have the wrong poll. So, Chad, can you play the last song you played in the opening of the show? And I'm going to launch a poll for everyone to try and guess what this song is. The last prelude before you did the Story Night song. I think this is right. This could all go wrong. So you should see a poll launch on your screen, and you try and guess what this song is from the 2010s. Okay. Well, 0% voted, so that must mean that I was unsuccessful in launching my poll. Let's relaunch it one more time, see if it works. If you see that poll on your screen, give it a guess. Oh, here now people are voting. All right, and then they all studied up, so now they know for sure what it is. Hey, Bonnie, that was what a perfect first Story Slammer to have. Bonnie actually has been a Story Slammer with us before, and just last season, she made it into our Slammer of the Year competition that we held up at the Boise Depot back in September, which was pretty exciting. So it was good to have somebody who had experienced that before. And you all can continue to raise I'm going to lower your hands for now because I'm not sure why those hands are up. You might have been trying to answer the poll. But when we come to the next Story Slam position, I'll ask you again if you'd like to raise your hands, and we'll choose from that. I'm going to end the poll now and share the results about, well, a lot of you answered anyway. We do have someone voted for every response. So let's see if I can share the results with you all. So we had 2% thought it was Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen. 5% thought it was Fugue in G Minor by Buck. 79% said Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus. And Chad, I believe that is the right answer, isn't it? There we go. 10% said Bad Romance, and 5% said Rolling in the Deep. Well, it is a little extra challenge figuring out when we hear these pop songs on the organ. That's pretty great. All right. So it sometimes happens that a Story Slammer enjoys their experience so much on our show that right away they contact us to become a featured storyteller, which is exactly what happened this month. This storyteller was with us for the aughts, the 00s, just last month. Feels like a lot longer than that. just last month, and boy, what a difference. So last month, he was on our stage at Jump, and then just a few weeks later, here he is now at our new WEBi-NiGHT platform. So please welcome to your screen, whatever that means to you, our next featured storyteller. There he is, Isaac. Hi, Isaac. And I think Chad has an introduction for you on the organ as well. So when he finishes his introduction, you'll take it away. Thank you.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, you know, growing up, I knew who I was. I knew what I wanted. I knew what I didn't have. I knew where I was going. I knew all these things. But really, I didn't know that all these things can be taken from me in seconds and just very quick. So let's rewind back to 2016, January of 2016. I was living in Hoi An, Vietnam. It's a beach town on the coast of Vietnam. I was there for already about 6 months, and in the January time, they have a rainy season, and it's not cold. It's very still muggy, and it's very, very wet. At this time in Vietnam, I was actually working with a woman who bought raw material from indigenous women from the mountainsides in central Vietnam. So she would purchase this material, and then she would then take that material, make bags out of them, and support that village through her business. So she had hired me to take photos for her, to run her social media platforms. So in January, I had already been there for 3 months, and every 3 months you have to go on a visa run. So basically what a visa run is, you just have to step out of the country and come back into the, you know, the same country if you wanted to. So I had planned before going to Vietnam to attend a meditation course called Vipassana in Cambodia, but I didn't get to go to that meditation course. So when the time came around, January came around, I signed up for this meditation course, and I was going to make it a double, a grand slam. I was going to travel to Malaysia. I was going to take a meditation course, and I was getting the visa run out of the way. So the day before I took off to Malaysia, the lady I was working with, she invited me to take photos at a tailor. So there I go in, the day before my flight, and it's pouring rain. I get on my motorbike, I get to the tailor, and I'm just drenched in water, but I'm so excited. I'm just like so determined that I'm gonna go to Malaysia for at least 15 days and 16 days to explore a new country. So I take my photos, and we came to an agreement that she was also going to pay me 2 months in advance for doing this work. So I did the work, I took the photos, and she paid me all in cash. And I took that cash with me on the plane to Malaysia. So the next morning, I drove 20 minutes north of Hoi An to Da Nang, got on the plane. Then I took a 6-hour ride plane to Malaysia. Got to Malaysia, we landed. I got off my plane. I walked to the bus ticket counter. I bought my bus ticket. Then from the bus ticket counter, I walked into the bus. I sat at not the last row, but the second to the last row maybe. So I sat there, and it's a 1-hour bus ride from the airport to the city center. So we park. I get off the bus. I said, okay, I have my camera. I've got my phone. I've got my backpack. And I just start searching my pockets like, oh shoot, where's my wallet? I where's my wallet? Where's my money? I ran back into the bus. I looked under my seat. I looked everywhere. Couldn't find my wallet. It was gone. I ran back out. I asked the bus driver if he's seen anybody, did somebody turn in a wallet to him? He said, no, I have no idea. And you got to know also, there's a few different languages spoken in Malaysia. And in the signs everywhere, they're in like an Indian language or Malay language, or even in Chinese. So all these different languages, you kind of not really kind of figure out what you need to do at that point. So I ended up calling the airport, and they had no idea either. So I wasn't about to make a 1-hour bus ride from the city center back to the airport, because it was an hour. By the time I got there, I would have, obviously it was gone. So I felt just for a few moments when I realized my wallet was gone, I felt like hot and tingly. Everything I started to sweat. And again, I'm in Malaysia, Southeast Asia. It's very hot. By this time it was maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I spent the next 4 hours looking for the correct police station to make a police report, to file a police report, to tell them, my situation. I'm an illegal alien in this country. I have no money. I have no passport. I finally ran into this guy, some random guy. I just asked random people, hey, can you help me get to this police station? This is the one I need to go to, after visiting a ton of them. And he finally said, you know what, I'll give you a ride. So he took me a ride to that police station, a very nice local person. I got to the police station, I filed my report, and luckily what really saved me and helped me was that I had a photo of my passport. I took a photo of my passport, and I took a photo of it, and I had it with me in my phone. So I presented this to the officer, and we finished the police report, and he obviously knew that I had no money, and he ended up giving me like 50 ringgit, which is maybe like 10 US dollars, which is actually enough for breakfast, for dinner that night, a place to sleep, and breakfast. So I walked to the closest hostel that was close to me. I had the most amazing local Indian food that I had ever tasted in my life. It was so good. I had, the dinner was just so filling. I ended up going to the hostel, walking to the hostel. I was so tired. By that time, it was already nighttime. I woke up the next morning around 10 o'clock. I was so tired. There was no windows in my hostel, in my room, so I didn't see that the sun was up. I thought to myself, oh man, I could have been at the US Embassy by now. So I packed up my things. I walked another hour in the blazing hot sun. Luckily in Malaysia, it's not so rainy, but it was so hot. By the time I got to the next hostel, I was drenched in sweat. And I was also, again, so very tired, so exhausted. My mentally was drained from trying to figure out what to do. By that time, I had already contacted my family, my parents back over here in Texas, actually, and, told them what had happened. And what's crazy also in these countries is that in order to get Wi-Fi to communicate with people around the world, you had to be a paying customer. So I didn't even have money to pay for Wi-Fi. So I had to tell people my situation, and they kind of gave me the Wi-Fi password just because of my situation. So I walked to that next hostel. I told them my situation. I told them I ran out of money. My passport is gone. I cannot really pay yet, but I can help with whatever you guys need, kind of just seeing if they could help me out. They ended up giving me a whole weekend for free, and which was very helpful for me at this time, because it was Friday. I had to make my way to the embassy. So I got my stuff, I put it into the hostel that I was now staying at. I walked another hour or so in the blazing hot sun to the US Embassy. I told them my situation. Again, luckily enough, I had a photo of my passport in my phone. So they said, well, it's going to take $250 and 10 days for you to get your new passport back. And I said, oh, shoot. Well, I don't have that money yet. I had it, but I don't have it anymore. Let me see what I can do. I'll come back on Monday. So went back to my hostel, contacted my family again. I made the most amazing friends that helped me with food, with drinks. Even though I thought I had nothing, I had probably one of the most amazing times of my life, hanging out with people that were traveling, that were experiencing. They may have experienced the same thing I did, but I just knew that I was taken care of and I was supported by people around me, and just knowing that I was gonna have to get this settled. So the weekend went by. I canceled my passport on Saturday. On Monday, the US Embassy opens again, and I walked another hour in the blazing hot sun to the US Embassy. I got a ticket. I waited for about 30 minutes to be called up to the desk at the kiosk. And as soon as I walked up to the counter, the lady that helped me on Friday, she recognized who I was, and she does this in front of the glass and said, "Is this yours?" And I said, "Yeah, that's mine." And I was like, "What? You have my stuff?" And then she says, "Is this your passport?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my passport, but I just canceled it on Saturday." And I was so bummed. It was crazy. It was just so random that my wallet had showed up in the US Embassy. She told me, "Oh yeah, somebody found it in the trash can and turned it in. Maybe an hour or two after you left on Friday." And I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm here to apply for a new passport. Here's $250. Here's my application. And then the lady said, "Okay, you have 10 days for it to come back and, back to the US Embassy." So I said, all right, well, I gotta survive at least 2 days, because the meditation course that I had signed up for was beginning on Wednesday. So I said, I have to survive at least 2 more days, minimal, food to get me to this meditation course, which really is donation based. And I just knew that I was gonna have 10 nights of a bed and 10 days with food. And it was in the northwest corner of Malaysia. And my plan was to kind of travel around the country a little bit before I went up to the meditation course. So I went through the meditation for 10 days. I got back to the US Embassy, and at the end of all that, I got my passport back, and I spent a few more days in Malaysia, went back to Vietnam and spent Lunar New Year. By this time, it was already February, and spent Lunar New Year in Vietnam for another 10 days before I went back to where I was originally starting my adventures in Hoi An, Vietnam.
Thank you, Isaac. Yay! That story reminded me. Well, first I should say that I'm going to say some things about the Pettit Group in a moment, our season sponsor. And I'm just not sure if there is someone in the webinar right now from the Pettit Group that wanted to share their camera. Yes, okay, I do see that there is somebody there. So I will get to them in just a moment. But that did remind me that I learned I was a very heavy sleeper related to a passport. I was on a train to Denmark, I believe. My friend and I from college, who's actually watching the show now, we were on this train, and it was a night train, and I was laying on my bench, and we had our stuff laying on the floor between us. And I was also extremely nearsighted, but during the night, I remember I opened my eyes and there was this like fuzzy image that was really big at first and then slowly kind of disappeared and then kind of vanished behind the door. And I was like, huh, that was weird. And then went back to sleep. Well, an hour or so later, I hear my friend rustling through things, and then there's a knock on our door, and they come in and they say, have you had anything stolen? And I would kind of woke up and I was like, what? And I remember thinking like, wait, if the thing was big and then got smaller, that means it was close to my face and was moving further away. And then my friend said, hey, I don't have my passport. And it turns out that we had been robbed in the night on this night train from Paris to Denmark. And while I basically watched them leave our room with the passport and the money that we had, fortunately, they got scared and threw it away in the toilet, and we recovered it. I don't remember the condition of the passport, but we did make it. So our season sponsor tonight, the Pettit Group, let me just say a little bit about them. The Pettit Group is a small, thoughtfully, carefully curated group of Boise realtors who are passionate about serving our clients with integrity and professionalism, and our community with deep philanthropic giving. And maybe I'll just share this with you really quick too, because this talk about philanthropy, these are, well, look at all this stuff. Hi, isn't that neat? Nope. There it is. These are all of the groups that the Pettit Group is supporting, all these nonprofits here in Boise. And they would love to have you like their Facebook page. I think that's going up in the chat right now, a link to their Facebook page. The Pettit Group at Group 1 Sotheby's. On the Facebook page, you can book an introductory meeting. You can read Andrea's thoughts about the impact of the pandemic on local real estate. And you can check out their latest video about selling an investment property in Boise. And here with us, it said a different name, but I recognize this face. It's actually Andrea herself. Hi, Andrea.
Hey, Jody.
And who do you have with you?
I've got Zoe Pettit, my official, she's going to draw a name we're going to give away a piece of art. We give art to our clients, and we give art at Story Night. So we're going to pick somebody. So
oh, great. And this is something we do at every show. Yep.
Yeah.
So this will be a piece of art by a Boise artist that then later on that will be able to catch up with them and get it to them, so hang it in their home. And
exactly.
So what are they going to pick the piece, or it's a piece that we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So when we work with our clients, we email them a link, and they get to see our whole collection and pick their favorite piece. So we're going to do that for whoever is drawn tonight. They'll get an email. We'll hopefully get their email address from you, and then they'll get to choose their piece, and then we'll get it delivered to them, whether they're here locally or far away.
Oh, great. And all of the attendees tonight have been entered into this drawing if you registered before 5 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, this was fun. Okay, so we're ready. Are we ready for the first one?
We're ready. We're ready for the drawing.
Okay, we have Aiden Fauzia.
Aiden Fauzia, congratulations. You have won a piece of art. And so we will find out how to connect you. But if
congratulations to Aiden.
If you don't hear from us, you can find Andrea at the Pettit Group and they will connect with you for that. Hey, thanks again for all your support of all of these nonprofits, and particularly hanging in with us during this experiment of Story Night, WEBi-NiGHT tonight. We appreciate it so much.
Hey, you gave me a reason to have a shower. So,
okay, yeah.
Getting out there. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And now we are going to have a special music piece. Oh, look at this change of scene we have from, he's amazing. He's transformed a organ into a grand piano. And during this piece by Dr. Chad Spears, we'll try another a poll for you to guess the title of this piece. This is a featured song from Chad that he wanted to share with us tonight on the piano.
Padmaye Swaha. Padmaye Idam Namama. Raja.
Thank you, Chad. That was beautiful. And it looks like our wise audience has once again picked the correct title by a narrow margin. Sonata Pathétique, Opus 13, received 25% of the votes. Solitude, and it is Solitude by Leo Ornstein, who, Chad, I don't know if you know, he actually lived to be 108 years old. That's quite amazing. Someone picked Rhapsody in Blue. Bless you, the 19% that picked No Toilet Paper, and 12% that picked All You Had to Do Was Stay. You guys are smart. And now we are going to try another featured storyteller. So if you have a story you'd like to share all the way from your home, you can go ahead and raise your hand now. And we will find our next person here in just a little bit. Let's see, it looks like, all right, I've got a person here. As they're spooling up, I'm gonna go ahead and let Chad play a little introduction. Thank you, Chad. And now I believe we have with us Elsa. Elsa, are you there?
Yes.
All right. Have you been to our show before?
No, it's the first time.
Oh, your first time. Well, welcome.
Yes.
What an experience for you.
Thank
then.
you.
All right. So you heard me, I think, giving the instruction before. Here's 5 minutes on a theme, somehow connected to tens. And we'll cut you off when we get to the end of that 5 minutes. We're keeping it family oriented tonight for all the people in their living rooms. And Chad's, well, actually, he's already played the intro. So I'm just going to give it away to you and share your story with us.
Okay. Oh, no.
Go ahead, Elsa. Is this more than you were bargaining for?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. All right. Well, we
I'm
can.
sorry.
That's okay. No problem. We can reshuffle and come to one of our other slammers.
Yes, please.
All
I
right.
am not ready for it. I wish I can do it, but.
Well, that way everyone can tell that this is a live show, that it's not pre-rehearsed. But anyway, it was lovely to visit with you. Thank you for attending the show tonight. I'll move you back over to where you were before. And let's see if I still have those hands raised. I think I do. So let's check in with this person and see how we do. Here she comes. It's Jessica. Jessica, are you with me?
Yes.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
Now, are you prepared to share a 5-minute story?
Absolutely. Let me start my timer. I'm in Portland, Oregon. My whole family's in Boise, possibly watching right now.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's let Chad give you an introduction, and then we'll come back to start your story.
Okay. Okay. You tell me when. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. So this story starts with a dog, and it ends with a dog, because you said we're going to share when our dogs look like, right? This is Marcy. Marcy. There's Marcy. Marcy and my relationship began when I was in college in 2011. And like every wise and non-impulsive college student, I decided I should get a dog. So I went to the Humane Society and I picked out a dog. The only one I could afford. She was $90 and she was in the bargain bin, and I got Marcy. Marcy turned out to be challenging. Marcy was not good with other dogs. She was not good with people. Please don't feed her right now. Don't feed her right now. Okay. And it was really challenging. I mean, she attacked a dog like right outside of my house. He attacked dogs when we would go to family get together. There she goes. When we would go out to friends' houses. And it was really hard to take her anywhere. I had this vision that she was going to be this companion. We could go, you know, to mountains and camping and all these different places, but I couldn't take her anywhere. And so fast forward to 2013, and I had graduated from college, and I was at home back in Boise, and I was working as a newspaper reporter for the Boise Weekly, which I miss. And Marcy bit a kid. Marcy bit my 15-year-old, back then 8-year-old brother's friend, Jeffrey. And Jeffrey's dad is an attorney. So it really became a decision. And my entire family was kind of saying, maybe you should put Marcy to sleep. And that was a really difficult decision because I was 23 at the time. And so I was kind of coming to terms with that, you know, and I had a boss that actually recommended training. He said, you should try, you know, doing some training with her and seeing if you can work her through it. And so I said, all right. And I just drained my sad little college savings account that I had left over. And I did this training through a company called Sit and Sit. And we worked really hard for a couple of years. I went to group classes and we did training, and we would, you know, be around dogs and be around people and kind of slowly starting to trust each other. And so it was in 2016 then that I decided to leave my job as a reporter of the Boise Weekly, and I made the leap to Portland, Oregon. And I didn't even apply for another job. I knew that there was a Sit and Sit here. And so I said, hey, you know, I was wondering, I was a client in Boise. I wonder if I could work for you. And yeah, they said, sure. And I was a dog trainer for like 3 months before they said, no, you're not good at that. But they did have me come on as their training consultant. So now my job, and it's been 4 years, is going into people's houses and meeting their terrible dogs that are just like Marcy used to be, and helping them have a life now where they can take their dogs to the beach and they can have their dogs around their family members. And I never would have thought that, you know, as I was studying journalism at the University of Montana, and this whole plan to be a newspaper reporter, and my whole life trajectory changed because of this like terrible dog that ended up not being quite so terrible. So that's it. That's the story. I'm quarantined in a tiny house. It's 175 square feet with my 2 dogs and my partner. So.
Oh my gosh. And that looked like a good sized dog.
Oh, yeah, there she is. There's Marcy.
There they are in their 117 square foot tiny home. Thank you for that story, Jessica. And hello to you from your home in Boise. And here's Chad with a play out for you. Thank you, Dr. Spears. Now we fling our net far and wide to find our featured storytellers for Story Night. And this time, however, we found our featured in a very unusual way, even for Story Night. I became aware of our next storyteller story from a tire advertisement on television. And that's not usually how we find storytellers, and they are not a sponsor of our show, so I'm not going to say their name right now. They can become a sponsor if they like. Fortunately, her story is not about a 10-year warranty on tires or anything like that. We're going to move into the 10 years that mean a lifetime. Here is, well, actually, Kate, I think first Chad has a special song for you, too. So we'll go to Chad for the organ and come back to you for your story. Kate Brusse.
Oh, thank you, Chad. We got that.
So my life was shaped by one of my greatest fears. And in the decade of 2010, I overcame that fear. My mom and my aunt, they lived downwind from the atomic bomb testing of the 1950s and early 60s. The wind carried the radioactive fallout that caused the genetic mutation that predisposed them to cancer. And that was a long time ago, but it changed our lives. So last August, I took flowers to the cemetery and I sat in the grass with my cousin Lacey in front of our mother's headstones. And I realized that my aunt was taken by breast cancer at the same age that I am now. So growing up, my mom often told the story of her mother's difficult death. And I wondered if the fear that she carried had kept her from getting checked out sooner. Because by the time her ovarian cancer was diagnosed, it was stage 4. And I too carried the fear during my life. In 2006, I was trying to get pregnant. And because of my family history of cancer, I was offered genetic testing. And I refused because I was afraid. And then a year later, in 2007, I was 33 years old and I was about 24 weeks into my pregnancy with triplets when I discovered a lump in my left breast. And I had felt the hard spot on my chest one morning when my husband Chad gave me a hug goodbye as I was laying in my hospital bed. I had landed in the hospital somewhat unexpectedly a few weeks earlier with preterm labor, and I still had at least 2 months of strict bed rest to go. So after that, I asked one of my 4 high-risk obstetricians to check out the lump. And he ordered an ultrasound that showed nothing of concern. So at the time, I knew that I had this high risk, high family history of breast cancer, but I didn't understand the genetics at the time. And I was completely unaware that estrogen could fuel a tumor, like little energy bites wrapped in bacon. So I was told that it was nothing of concern, so I was more than happy to believe that doctor that this lump was just a normal part of pregnancy and the body changes during that. So, but then 3 weeks later, the lump seemed larger. So I asked a second doctor to check it. Actually, he was the one that ordered the ultrasound and it showed that there was nothing of concern. And then at 30 weeks pregnant, I looked down and saw a spot of blood on my shirt, and it had actually come from the nipple of this same breast that had the lump. So I asked my doctor about it. That was the 3rd doctor at that point. And he told me to stop worrying. He said that the lump would resolve itself when I started to breastfeed. So the next day, when the 4th obstetrician rotated into the hospital, I asked him. And he listened to me, and he sent a surgeon to meet with me. And he measured the lump, and he said, okay, I'll come back in 2 weeks. And if it has grown, then we will order biopsy. So he came back in 2 weeks, and it had grown by 2 centimeters. I had the biopsy, and it was Friday, of course. So I had to wait over the long weekend with wondering what my results would be. So then Monday morning, the surgeon strode back into my room and he said abruptly, "We have a carcinoma, and call your family together and we'll talk later." And my nurse had followed him into the room, and she sat on the edge of my bed and held my hand until my husband could get there. And I thought that this was the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. I was about to have 3 tiny babies, and they would need 110% of their mother. And so I thought about my aunt, and she had left behind 4 children when she died of breast cancer. And now my future seemed uncertain. I didn't even know if I would be here to see my children go off to kindergarten, let alone college. It was not part of the plan. So after the diagnosis, my husband and I took a few days to break the news to our close family and friends so that we wouldn't have to announce the birth of our triplets at the same time. And the stress of the diagnosis brought on stronger contractions. So, well, actually, yeah, I was trying to keep those babies from being born. I was only 33 weeks along. So, so then, initially, the very hardest thing for me was feeling like I was not in control. I'm a bit of a control person. The cancer was in control. And so none of my doctors or nurses knew what to do with this woman that was pregnant with triplets and had breast cancer. So they sent in Jan. And Jan was a nurse with 24 weeks or 24 years of experience. And she worked in the neonatal intensive care unit. And she was a breastfeeding expert. And it turned out she was herself a breast cancer survivor. So they sent her to meet with me. And when she walked in the room, she just glowed, and she carried herself with such grace. And all the women in my family that had been through this before me were dead. And so to just see her standing there above my bed was just a huge relief. And she was able to explain what the next steps were in a way that I could understand. And she said I could ask her anything about her experience. So I just remember telling everyone how much better I felt after talking with Jan. And because of her, I realized that I had many important choices to make and options available. For example, my surgeon discouraged me from breastfeeding and actually told me I couldn't breastfeed because it would make the surgery harder. And the thought that I could not nourish these little babies was agonizing for me. So Jan researched whether I could actually breastfeed from my healthy breast and determined that I could, as long as I just dumped my milk from on the days that I would get antibiotics or different procedures done. So she said, she reminded me that it was my body, it was my babies, it was my choice. So I trusted her, and I ended up changing surgeons. And with each decision I made, I took that control back from the cancer. Another decision I made was to go ahead and finally get the genetic testing. And then I decided ahead of time that no matter what, that the day that the triplets were born was going to be a joyous day. And so we just put the cancer aside on that day. And so a few days later, on August 25th in the morning, I cried tears of joy as each baby announced their arrival with a soft cry. And Dad and I had 3 healthy babies. And I realized that my body was strong and resilient, and it had just created something so good, even while I had cancer active in my body. So we scheduled my surgery for 10 days later. And on the eve of my surgery, I got my genetic results. I was positive. The mutated gene was passed on to me. And at that point, that meant for the rest of my life, even if I had 1 mastectomy, that I would still have an extremely high chance that I would get cancer in the healthy breast. So my choice to be tested and the resulting information made me confident of my decision to have a mastectomy, and I wasn't afraid anymore. What I learned is that living with the fear was almost worse than the cancer. So we brought the triplets home, and we fed and diapered them 8 times a day around the clock. And as they grew, we were able to feed them greater amounts less often. So not only did the triplets benefit from the breastfeeding, but it gave me so much peace and comfort to have that experience before losing both of my breasts. And I hadn't thought about it quite that way before, but I think Jan had known that the whole experience would heal my mind, body, and spirit. And I really couldn't have done it without her. I kept thinking, where do I want to be in 10 years? I wanted to make sure that I would be around. So I made other choices, to have that other mastectomy, to have my ovaries taken out, to prevent recurrence. I started an anti-estrogen pill that I would take for 10 years. So exactly a year after my first surgery, I had a clean bill of health. And that's when the inspiration to become a nurse hit me like a ton of bricks. I was a newspaper reporter in my first career, and I sat down at the kitchen table and I opened up Idaho Statesman, and there was Jen's picture, the nurse that had made such a difference for me. It was the obituary section. She had died. And it just like stabbed me in the heart to see her face there and to not have known. So when I met Jan, she told me that she was so happy to help me through my experience because someone had shown her the way too, and that person was no longer around to thank. So she helped me. And so I thought that's what Jan would want me to do. So I decided that I wanted to become a nurse. So even though I had just, the triplets had just turned 1, and I was having my second breast reconstructive surgery in like a month, and my final infusion of a targeted therapy in November, the next month, I asked my husband how he would feel if I went back to school. So I did. And, but before classes started, my oncologist ordered a bone scan to follow up on an abnormal chest x-ray. The x-ray had shown a mottled rib, and bone is a common site of metastasis. So I was scared and I didn't want to pay my tuition until I had the results of that. Well, I found out that I was okay, but then I started thinking, well, am I really going to be okay? Am I really going to get to complete my nursing degree, or is all this time and money and effort spent on my education going to be a huge waste of time? But I decided that that wasn't going to stop me from beginning. I just lived as though I would live on. So then 3 years later, it was 2012, and I reached 5 years of survivorship. And the triplets started kindergarten, and I was there to get them off of the school bus. I graduated nursing school. So my ultimate dream job was to work focused in on breast cancer. But to do that, I would need a few years on the oncology floor first. And at the time, they didn't hire new grads. So a year and a half after my first nursing job, I finally got a position working 12-hour night shifts on the oncology unit. So, and I became a chemotherapy nurse, and I earned my oncology certification. And I was part of this team that just pours their whole intellect and all their spiritual and physical energy into caring for these inspirational people. So that was a privilege. And then before I knew it, it was 2017, and I had reached 10 years of survivorship. So my oncologist told me to never come back. I had made it, and that milestone essentially means that you're cured. So I had worked these 12-hour night shifts for 5 years. So I decided it was time to focus on my long-held career goal to specialize in breast cancer. And with my personal and professional experience, I thought it would be easy to find a position. But was anything ever easy? So it took over a year. And my low point was when a hiring manager told me in an interview that I would never work in her department because I am a survivor. So they said it would be too hard for me, and they assumed what it would feel like to be a survivor. But I had already worked in oncology for 5 years. So it turned out that everything I had survived prepared me for what I wanted to do. So soon, thankfully, a position came up with a new surgeon that was returning to Boise. And he would bring new exciting innovations in breast reconstructive surgery back to Idaho for the very first time from all over the world. And that team saw me, and they saw the whole me, and they offered me the job and the chance to do my thing, which is to provide choices to people that are in line with their goals.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate. And now it's time for another slammer. So let me see those hands come up if you are interested in sharing a story now with us. And I see some hands rising here. So we will try selecting a person here. And as they're spooling up, Chad, why don't you go ahead and give them their intro? All right, and welcome to Bryce. Hello there, Bryce.
How are you doing?
Good. Are you with us here in Boise or somewhere else?
I'm with you here in Boise.
Okay, great. Well, oh, and here come the pets. See, I told you that's what was going to happen.
Yep. You're watching too.
All right, great. And you have a story to share with us?
You know what? I have an improvisational story to share.
Okay, take it away.
About someone else who's in Oklahoma, who was also watching and suggested that I share. So I'm going to tell you about 10 seconds of terror that ends with cutting my trailer out of a tree. So in this case, I've been working up in the woods, up in northern and central Oregon, and out of Unity, John Day area. And I was doing some work to keep cattle out of stream beds. And I was finally done with the project, and I had all of my possessions in a trailer that was actually a converted back of a truck that was following along my truck behind. And just when I get to town, I look in the rearview mirror and I see the hitch, the tongue of the trailer slowly rise up. And I say, oh, what am I going to do? My trailer is now only connected to my truck by chains that are going to break. So in the back of, so I put my plan, the 1 second blink plan, and I was going to take my truck and put my brakes on and ram the back of my truck into the trailer and stop it. Well, the trailer understood what was going on. So much to my surprise, the trailer was no longer back there as I'm watching. And instead, the trailer made a quick left turn and zigged right past me in the left-hand lane. So that's a really bad situation. When your trailer is now passing you on the left-hand side of the road with most of your earthly possessions in the back, all of my clothes, my chainsaw, all of everything I had was pretty much in that trailer, and now it's passing me in the left-hand lane. And instantly I look ahead to see if there's anybody coming. There's no one coming. And then I'm like, okay, I was going to ram it from behind. Now I'm going to have to chase it down the highway, hopefully find it, and hopefully I can catch up to it, because now it was ahead of me. And just as now I'm accelerating to try to catch up to it, it has another plan, and it takes a sharp turn left and launches off an embankment over to the John Day River, which goes into John Day, rear to Mount Vernon and John Day. So now my trailer with all of my possessions is now launched off of the highway, off a bank, and I believe has gone into the river. Only once I get to it, I pull off, I find that the trailer isn't in the river, it's actually in a tree. So now my old Ford made out of an old truck trailer is now stuck about 15 feet up in a tree. And I'm figuring out, how do I get a trailer down out of a tree? Something they don't teach you in school. So here I am, I'm looking at this, and I climb up, and I've got my chainsaw in there, so I start cutting some limbs, and I start dropping it, but it's still stuck. And so the edge of the road and where the branches are, about here, it's launched kind of in a V. So I cut out some of the tree, and then I take a come along, and I slowly winch it off of the road, off of the tree. And the tree just gracefully just bends down as I have my come along, and the truck pulls the tree over, and it just gracefully just deposits the trailer unharmed onto an old road that's right below it next to the riverbank. And from there, I rehitched the trailer. It doesn't seem to be damaged at all. It had been protected by the tree when it landed. And I connect it to the truck, and very, very slowly we headed into town with everything still attached except for the chainsaw, my clothes, everything I had is now deposited. But that was 10 seconds of utter terror.
Thank you, Bryce.
My trailer left me.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And now Chad's playing us out. And you have a poll as well. That was a very short sample for you all to guess. We'll give you 10 more seconds to fill out that poll. So plug in your answers now. And also, if you've done that and you would like to tell it to be the next Story Slammer, go ahead and hit that hand, raise your hand up, and we'll see if we have one last storyteller tonight.
I thought I was never going to be chosen.
You got picked. All right, we're going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. And go ahead and raise your hand if you're interested in being a slammer. All right, looks like the, yep, we still got the right answer there. 41% for Justin Bieber's Baby from 2010. And a lot of you thought it was Just the Way You Are. Or sorry about that. Well, let's see. I don't actually have a slammer queued up, but why don't we do this? Raise your hand if you are from out of town. Let's see who's here with us from out of town. Oh, we got a lot of people from out of town. All right. I won't necessarily put you on the screen, but I'm going to allow you to talk just to hear where you're from. Noreen, I think I could hear you now. Noreen?
Hi.
Hi. Where are you watching from?
Coeur d'Alene.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining us from Coeur d'Alene. Have you been down to Boise to see the show before?
I have. I lived in Boise until October of 2018, so I used to come see you at Jump all the time.
Oh, beautiful.
And I missed the shows tremendously, so I was so excited when I saw this. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for joining us. And let's see, we also have Karen. Karen, are you... Oh, it's not is not available because Karen is using a different version. Oh, really? Well, that's fussy. All right. It's making me promote Karen to a panelist for some reason. Let's see if I see her. Here we are. Hi. I don't think you're Karen, though, are you?
No, I'm Karen's husband. I'm Sean Bell.
Hi, Sean.
I'm Kate Brusse's brother.
Oh, wow. How wonderful.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you got to see your sister share her story with us. What a powerful story.
Yeah, I've heard it many times, but it's beautiful every time.
Oh, well, and where do you live?
St. Albans, Vermont.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think you might have the prize for being the furthest away then. Thanks for joining us. Let's see. And we also have Mindy. Are you with us, Mindy?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Where are you watching from?
I'm watching from St. Petersburg, Florida.
Well, that's pretty far away as well. My goodness. And did you know one of the storytellers?
I didn't, but I lived in Boise until this past August. So I was really excited that this was available.
And I assume you're all sheltered at home as well in Florida.
We are, but maybe not quite as well as you guys are doing.
Well, we're all doing what we can, I guess.
Yeah. We're trying.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us tonight. And let's see, Todd. Todd, where are you watching from? Whoops, not unmuted yet. No Todd. Well, thanks to all of the people who have joined us from near and far. I am queuing up my song here, our final song. I have a few thank yous I'd like to do too, and just know that I can see you leaving. Now, I can't from Jump, but here I can. So, thank you for the support from the Boise Arts and History Department. This program is also supported in part by the Idaho Commission on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. Thank you to our media sponsors, Boise State Public Radio, as well as Radio Boise. And we also have a radio show. It's Story Night on Stray Theater, which you can hear the Sunday before our live show from 5:30 to 6 on Radio Boise. And of course, you can always listen to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, or however you get your podcasts. The link is on our website. We actually just passed 100,000 listens on our podcast.
Oh.
And strangely, by far, the #1 city listening to our podcast is Watertown, New York. Now, I didn't make it to speak to anybody who is from Watertown, New York, but if you are from Watertown, raise your hand now. I'd be interested to know that you're there and why our podcast is so popular there. Thank you to our crew, our musical guest, Dr. Chad Spears, Carolyn Valaquette, monitoring the chat, and our photographer, Chelsea Hirata, capturing screenshots for our archive and for social media. Look for her photos and tag yourself on our Facebook page in just a few days. Thank you to our volunteer board of directors and our studio guides, many of whom helped with the quick pivot of our show to this platform. And our storytellers, thank you to Jump, who, even though we couldn't use their facility this month, they helped us promote the show and supported us in doing this. And then, of course, this is my tradition at the end of the show. Story night, story good night, beginning, middle, now at the end. Authentic, inspiring, spontaneous. So thank you. You shared your story and you really listened. I may have come here as a stranger, but now I'm leaving as a friend. And so the story doesn't end. Thank you so much for being with us for Story tonight. Dr. Chad Spears is going to take you out with a final song on the organ. We're going to review how this was, see if we do it again next month. You can find that out on our on our Facebook page and in our e-newsletter if you subscribe to that. I really loved being with all of you here tonight, and I'll see you again soon.
couldn't see if I had.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, everybody. Well, we still have 45 people